Ross Ulbricht, founder of the Silk Road, started his empire with the intentions of creating a libertarian revolution. In this episode, we'll uncover the rise and fall of Dread Pirate Roberts.
Hey, what up, everybody? This is Eric with Mind Melt Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the Silk Road, and I've got my co-host, Kendra.
Yo, hey.
And we just wanted to say Happy 4th. I know it's the week of the, anniversary of America, and it's a good time to kind of reflect on what the Founding Fathers believed in, because it has a lot of relevance to what we're going to be talking about today, which is liberty and freedom and personal freedom and the right to a successful life as long as you're not harming others. And that's definitely what all of the Founding Fathers thought was possible for America. So there's a lot of craziness going on in the world right now. We've got a lot of issues and some things good with the current administration, but a lot of things bad. And one of the bad things is just with this immigration reform. I think that it's really important to take a look at the Founding Fathers and just kind of reflect on the fact that they were immigrants that came here to settle this land, and they took a lot of this land from Native Americans. And for us to be demonizing Mexican immigrants or immigrants from other countries, Central and South America, when they're connected to us by land, I think it's really sad. I do think that there's a certain way to come to this country, and it should be taken seriously to do it the right way. But the way that we're handling the situation with taking children away from their families is just wrong. So I just kind of want to talk about that a little bit. And what do you think, Kendra?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of support for it, which is blowing my mind. People on Facebook saying, well, they must have known the risks and things like that. And it just kind of makes me reflect on how privileged we are here, because we can't really even understand what it would be like to flee a country with our family for the betterment of our family.
Yeah, I know. I think it's kind of interesting, too. A lot of the people that seem to be so into this are, the Republican Party. And one of the things that I find to be interesting with that is that, they are so into protecting American rights and keeping this country the way it is, but they're not thinking about the fact that a lot of other countries are horrible. And for them, all they want is a successful life. I mean,
yeah, all they want is freedom and opportunity.
Right. We're so lucky to live in a country. Just because we're born here doesn't mean that we're any more privileged or should be any more privileged to be here than anybody else. Like I said, there's just a lot of fucking shitty Americans. So it's like,
and a lot of it is ignorance. So I can't be too mad. But at the same time, calling it out, I mean, you should definitely call it out, because it's fucked up to say that is okay for families to be separated.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, because it's I'm sure that there's negative immigrants. There's probably drug dealers and, whatever that people are worried about, but
just like there is in America.
Right. And that's what I was just going to say, but there are a lot of shitty Americans. I mean, when you look at just, how many
people.
Well, and we have we really, we're like serial killer capital of the world. We've had more serial killers here than most countries. We've had, we import most of the world's drugs for our own use. Mm-hmm. And it's we're not really this shining example of what a culture should be.
Yeah, our prison population is ginormous. They're overflowing our prisons.
Yeah. And so with a lot of our negative aspects, it just kind of shows you how much worse it can be if people are willing to, risk their lives just for the opportunity to be a citizen here. Mm-hmm. So
it's fucked up.
It is fucked up. But I think that, it seems like there's enough people that are upset with the immigration reform that are
Mhm.
allowing their voices to be heard. And that's also being heard by the current administration and the people that are involved at the top,
Definitely.
which is good. It gives us the opportunity to let our voices be heard and actually see some sort of change. And I think that it's good. But there has been a lot of damage that hasn't, can't be undone. And it's kind of funny because another thing that I was thinking about was just how if these children are separated from their families and then we have to have them in our system, then these kids are going to be financially aided for their,
Hmm.
young adult life until they're an adult with our tax dollars, which is, I mean, putting the emotional aspects and everything aside, that's, the biggest concern for people is people coming in here and taking advantage of our system. But this
Hmm.
is really going to hurt our system financially just as much as having people here working or whatever that they're
Right.
afraid of.
Along with the fact that some of these kids are like 3 years old
Right. And then
and don't even know like their mom's first and last name. They know it
yeah.
by mom.
And then when they're brought into this system, like let's say that we can't get them back together with their family, they're going to be trapped in this system
Yeah.
and we're going to be financially aiding them, but that's also a traumatic experience. So now they have to go from foster care, maybe get adopted or something like that. And we're throughout this course financially aiding them. And everybody knows that the foster care system is extremely negative for a lot of students. I mean, or a lot of the kids. It's there's a lot
Hmm.
of rape and assault that happens at these facilities. There's always people taking advantage of other people, and it's just a really negative experience, which could go into their teens, and then all of a sudden, as an adult, they've been through this like negative experience, which could be traumatic for them, which might turn them into the criminal that people are afraid of.
Yeah, it's like we're perpetuating this.
Yeah, we're like literally like
We're creating
we're
this.
creating the thing that people are afraid of, and it's
Yeah, that
just
we're bitching about.
yeah, it's just crazy.
America just blows my mind sometimes.
Well, yeah, I mean, don't blame it on just America though. It's really just our. I think it has a lot to do with our current administration. I don't think. I know that there have been other presidents in the past that have been. Even Obama was pretty strict on immigration, but I don't
Yeah,
think
no,
that they
that's
would have
true.
been tearing families apart. And that's just, which okay, it's been changed now. But the fact that this was even a idea in somebody's mind to begin with is
Right?
fucking crazy.
Like who fucking thought of that?
Yeah, so I didn't want to get too deep into politics and stuff, but that's just my opinion. You should never take families apart like that, no matter what. If you
Hmm.
want to ship them back to Mexico or whatever ethically you can do, and that the crazy thing about this is they're fucking misdemeanors. Like
Hmm.
it's just a misdemeanor charge. So
Really? That's it?
yeah.
Huh.
So I just want to talk about that with the fourth and freedom and everything. I thought it was kind of important. But I mean, I do think that this country was started with really great intentions, and I think that one of the best intentions was that everybody has the right to happiness and freedom, the pursuit of happiness, as long as you're not hurting other people. And that being said, I think that we should jump right into our topic for today, which is the Silk Road. And the reason I think that is just because the guy who started this, his name's Ross Ulbricht, and he was a really big proponent of the libertarian movement.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, he was a big voice for libertarianism. He went to libertarian clubs and things like that. And if I were to like claim a title politically for what I am, I would probably say that I'm kind of libertarian. I'm definitely in the middle. I think that the Libertarian Party gets a little fucking off kilter sometimes, and they're just a little
Yeah.
crazy with shit.
Any party, I'm sure does.
Yeah. But the Ross Ulbricht, he was a really interesting guy. I had so much fun researching this case, and I've read a lot about him before, and when the Silk Road was around, I had been on it several times and have
Yeah, I
and
think that's why this topic is so interesting for us because we
yeah,
have had personal experience with it around the time that it was huge.
yeah, and I loved reading Dread Pirate Roberts' post, which is
Yeah.
Ross Ulbricht's. I just found him fascinating. I thought that the stuff that he was saying was so profound and powerful. And I just remember just like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking genius. You know, the whole time I just was
He
appalled.
literally is.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. Let's talk a little bit about Ross Ulbricht. He was born on March 27th, 1984, and he was born in Austin, Texas. He graduated high school in Austin, Texas, and then went to college there as well. And he got a bachelor in '06 for physics, which is really cool because I love physics. So, and then he went from Austin to Penn State, and that's a really prestigious college. You know, this guy wasn't stupid by any means.
No.
And he was specializing in material science at Penn State. Like I said, he was heavily involved in the Libertarian Party and lived extremely minimalistically. He actually lived in his friend's basement that was an unfinished basement with like concrete floors for free. And he just had like a bed and like a couple shirts and pairs of jeans. And he was like, at this point, you know, like when he was in his final year, he was, I think for the entire year, he was trying to live off of only like, I want to say $1 a day.
Wow.
That was like his goal. He had money, you know, but he was trying to live off of $1 a day just to see if he could do it. It might have been $10.
He seems super
it was
humble.
$1 a day. Yeah. And so, yeah, he is. I mean,
Yeah, he seems like a super down to earth person.
yeah.
His parents are really cool too.
Yeah, he was into, you know, drum circles and things like
Yeah.
that. And when he was at Penn State, that's where he met the love of his life. And her name is Julia Turiansky. Hopefully I'm not butchering her last name. But Julia, you know, like she was kind of a free-spirited, Democrat, which, you know, clashed a little bit with his libertarian
Later
views.
on, yeah.
Yeah. And he was just, but they were immediately attracted to each other, and they started dating, you know, within, I think it was his last year at Penn State. They started dating, and you know, when he first brought her home to his pad, she was just like, what the hell is wrong with you? You're living like a caveman, you know? But she was kind of intrigued by his whole like unique personality and the willingness to try to go against the grain.
I would be too.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting, you know, and he was just kind of himself. He didn't try to like pander to her, you know, just because he was attracted to her.
Yeah.
And so they started kind of dating, and that was a big deal for him. He just like, he absolutely loved this girl. And so after he graduated school, he didn't really find any need to be in that area anymore. And him and Julia moved back to Austin, Texas. So this was the start of kind of a new chapter in his life, because, you know, he's in a relationship and they're living together in Austin. She was able to meet some of his old high school friends and kind of hear the stories about Ross and just like get to know his family. And but, you know, Ross, because he was so successful in school, he thought that he was going to be immediately extremely successful in life. And that started kind of a depression for him. He didn't really know which direction he wanted to go in. He tried trading stocks, you know, and was kind of unsuccessful with that. He thought maybe he could go into oil, but was unsuccessful with that. And he knew that he wanted to do something big, but
He tried to start a video game company. And
Yeah,
that
that's right, yeah.
completely failed.
Yeah, he tried to start a video game company, and I think it was a pretty basic company, but he did the coding himself, right? Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah. And so he was just like really distraught on the direction that he wanted to go in life. And you know, he had a friend who had started this company called Good Wagon Books Company. And it was a nonprofit organization that just resold books. And him and Ross kind of partnered up in this, and they were relatively successful. They had a warehouse, and they had a pretty large inventory of books that they were reselling, and they were sending them all over the country. They were selling them online through Amazon, and they were pretty successful with it. I mean, some months they even brought in about $10,000, which is, you know, fucking books. That's a lot of money. And and during this time he didn't really feel like this was his calling. He felt like it was something that he was interested in, but just, he kind of learned a little bit about business through doing it, and he was just getting depressed. And during this time, Julia and him were having a lot of problems too, because Ross was kind of depressed. He wasn't doing, extremely well. She was a little bit younger than him, and they didn't really see eye to eye politically, and so a lot of their arguments were about politics and things like that. Because she was very strong politically, as was he. So they started kind of having some problems, and they kind of had an on and off relationship, and this kind of like gave Ross this space to really reflect on the direction that he wanted to go in his life, and he started to think maybe he should do something along the lines of a free market trading website where you could get anything that you wanted. And he had heard about this website called Tor, which Tor was a way that you could sign on to the internet and go into what's called the dark net or the dark web. And it would change your IP address every so often so that you can't be traced. And it just jumbled your IP address and made you look like maybe you're in Germany when you weren't. And through this, he started to kind of like really rack his brain, like, what should I be doing with this? This is great, way not to be tracked, just like the old days, like with his envisionment of the libertarian movement and being really free. He felt like you were really free on this dark net. It was untraceable. You could literally,
Anonymous.
yeah, anonymous. You could really move through this site or this web freely. So this idea kind of continued to grow, and he didn't really have much coding experience, but he was such a smart guy that he just started to research how to code, and he got books and was starting to code this entire website and made basically a website that was similar to Amazon or eBay with a rating system. And, there could be, you could set up a user account or a vendor account, and anything imaginable is what his vision was. You'd be able to sell anything imaginable and be completely anonymous and completely untraceable. And
anything illegal, anything goes.
Yeah. Anything legal too. You could buy whatever. So if you want to buy, like, there were people that were literally selling like fucking frying pans and stuff like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, totally. So, so he started coding it. He got to a certain point, but he was just like, how the hell am I going to make the currency part of this anonymous? So he had been racking his brain and kind of talking to one of his friends, and one of his friends was like, oh man, you should check out this thing called Bitcoin. It's, it's this anonymous currency that's web-based, and that was his golden ticket. So now he had a way that he could code this entire website. He could, make it so people could spend money anonymously on this entire website, and he'd be able to have, untraceable, like the entire thing is untraceable, and it's all through, the postal service, so it can be international. And this is like, big deal for him. He's excited, but he realizes that this website needs somehow to get traction, and that he's, like, if he just creates the website and doesn't have any,
tell anyone.
Well, also, but if he doesn't have any products on the website, people might just go on there and be like, okay, this is cool, but there's nothing on here.
Yeah.
So he went and rented a small shop, kind of far away from his house in Austin, or his apartment in Austin, and started growing mushrooms. And so he grew a bunch of mushrooms and waited for them to come into, maturity. And then he tested the mushrooms himself to make sure that they were, good, high quality, which they were. And then this entire time, he hadn't told anybody. This entire thing, he had been working on this for a year, and he hadn't told anybody, not even Julia, right? So him and Julia had been having their fair share of problems, but Ross was excited at this point, and he just was like, okay, she's the love of my life. I want to show her that I can be something. And so he blindfolded her, and he took her out to this private warehouse where he had been growing these mushrooms. And he, let her in the door in the musty room, and it's dark in there, and he turns on the light, And she's like, what the hell is this? You know?
There's cow shit everywhere. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
And it was just like, all he had was like these industrial shelves with mushrooms. And she was like, I'm confused. What is this, Ross? And he was like, they're mushrooms. They're psychedelic mushrooms, you know, like we can sell them. And I have, you know, I don't know how many pounds. It was probably about 100 pounds, I think, of
And
mushrooms.
he was pretty into psychedelics
Right.
at this point as
Yeah,
well.
and weed. And so he, you know, he like told her like, you know, I've been working on this thing. I've been kind of keeping it from you for the last year. But basically it's, you know, this website where we can anonymously sell drugs. And I've got these mushrooms that I'm going to sell first. And she was like extremely apprehensive, obviously. She
Yeah.
didn't, you know, she didn't feel very confident that this was a safe way to live a life. And she didn't think that this website could be as anonymous as Ross was saying. It just didn't make sense to her, which it didn't make sense to me when I first heard it either.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, this has got to be a government.
Well,
Well, especially
in a
because the
way,
Navy.
she was right too.
Yeah.
Though I mean, like eventually it did come down
I mean,
on him.
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it still is pretty untraceable. The
Yeah,
only
he made
thing,
some
yeah, the
mistakes.
only thing that made it dangerous were the slight mistakes that he
Yeah,
made along
that's
the way. But Julia, you know, she was trying to be the reasonable one here, but Ross was dead set. He
Yeah.
was, this is,
He's like, this is it.
This is it. This is
My
how I'm
calling.
going to write my book of my life, you know? And so he had a plan. He was going to unveil it in January of 2011. And when that day came, he was nervous. He you know, he had all of his coding ready to go, and he went live, and there was no traffic at all. You know, so nobody knew about it. How are you gonna know to just go to a random, like, if you've
Yeah.
ever been on tour, you like, the website addresses are fucking ridiculous, and there's no real searching for websites, especially back then. Now it's a little bit easier to find things, but back then it was like really difficult. It was, and the website IP, or the address for the websites, would be like, you know, like 3xylbn.tor. You know, it was just like really weird websites. And I remember the Silk Roads was really weird, and I remember it having to be changed and all this shit, because it was just, you know, it was, you got to keep it kind of like keep him guessing a little bit, I guess, you know. So so he went live, but there was no traffic. So he decided that he was going to post in a couple of blogs anonymously, just kind of telling people, hey, you know, I found this really weird site through this thing called Tor where you can buy drugs anonymously.
Yeah. Has anyone ever heard of it?
Yeah,
Like,
has it, you know, trying to sound like he just was like interested user. And then his first major post was on Shroomery, and that's a website where you can go and discuss different drugs, psychedelics in particular. It's a really common website. And people started to pay attention, and they started going on to Tor and checking this out. And pretty soon Ross was selling his mushrooms just a little bit here and a little bit there. And then someone bought 10 pounds from him. So, you know, it was like really quickly it was starting to progress. And then within a month, he had, you know, new vendors that had just signed up that were selling things, and his website was exploding. But he didn't really, you know, he wasn't prepared for it to get as big as it did so quickly.
Yeah.
And so, so then he had to get some help, and he wasn't a real strong coder, but he had a friend that was. And so he had a friend kind of assist him on, you know, things on the back end just to get things going. So now it went from one person knowing it to two with Julia knowing about it. Now there's three, which was his friend. So the risk had just increased substantially.
Yeah. Tripled.
Well, Julia, after a couple months of this, you know, Ross was so engrossed into his laptop that he just couldn't get away from it. And he was starting to not care about his hygiene, things like that, because he was just so obsessed with it. And Julia wanted to go out and do things, but he was like, I can't get away from this, you know? And I'm sure you remember, you know, like how I used to be with things like that. Like I was just so engrossed into whatever. I get obsessed with things. So,
Well, especially when it was that huge for him, like that.
Right.
I mean, that was his big break.
And he was by himself essentially. I mean, he had his one friend that was helping him, but I mean, he had to moderate everything. So he had to handle like the escrow accounts.
Yeah. It's probably a lot of work.
Oh my God, I couldn't even
Like
imagine.
24/7.
Yeah, I mean, like look at how many employees something like
Yeah,
Amazon has, and this
right.
company at this time had grown to that level. I mean,
Right.
not quite at this point that we're referencing, but within a short time, it really did. So Julia was fed up. She needed to get away. She went back to New York and stayed with a friend. And while she was over there, she was just racking her brain. She didn't know like what to do. So she kind of broke down and she told her friend what Ross was up to.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No,
Yeah.
I honestly didn't look too far into their relationship.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so she broke down. She told her friend, and her friend was like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" So Julia showed her.
That's super illegal.
Well, then then after Julia went to New York, she had invited her friend to come to Austin and stay with them for a while. And they all went out one night and got a little drunk, and her friend and Ross had gotten into a fight. And she said something to Ross about how she knew what Ross was doing.
Oh.
And Ross was fucking irate
Pissed.
and
broke up with her?
broke up with Julia
Yeah.
and threw out her friend.
Yeah.
And her friend went back to New York and made a Facebook post about it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What did it say?
I don't
You-
I don't have it written down, but it was just
About like
it was
mentioning
about
his
Ross
name?
and the Silk Road.
Damn.
Yeah. And so Ross panicked, obviously, and flagged it, and then wrote her an email like, please, 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 like,
Yeah.
I'll do anything. Just don't, please delete this. And she did.
Yeah.
She took it down. So that was Ross's real first scare.
Scare.
I mean, this was a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, along the same time of this, there was a pipe that broke at his warehouse where his mushrooms were stored. And his landlord called him saying that his landlord was there and needed to get in.
Oh.
And so Ross was able somehow to get there and clean everything out before his landlord got there.
How?
So this kid, like, he grew up with a really good but sheltered life. I mean, his parents were kind of hippies. They all smoked weed, They lived in a solar panel. So, like, obviously they're...
Well, yeah, they had like land in Costa Rica
Yeah.
with solar panel powered
Yeah.
houses, bamboo houses.
Yeah. So they were obviously, like, relatively, like,
Yeah.
progressive, forward thinking.
Right.
So he had been exposed. It wasn't like they were extremely conservative Christian or anything like that,
Yeah.
but they lived a pretty honest life. And Ross had never really gambled with this level of crime before. And I think that for him, these couple of small encounters just really made him recognize that he can't be,
He's not invincible.
he needs to be more careful.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so he had been kind of communicating with this guy at this time named Variety Jones. I keep wanting to say Android Jones, but he had been kind of communicating with Variety Jones, and this Variety Jones was a guy that through the Silk Road kind of met Ross because he saw a lot of flaws in the security of the Silk Road. And so he had mentioned to Ross, look, I can see right through your security here, and
Yeah.
this is a real problem, and like you need to get it fixed, right? And
Bite
so
you in the
Ross,
ass.
yeah, so Ross was like, this guy's obviously trying to help me. And so Ross and him had started to become friends, essentially. Like, he had started giving Ross tips and trying to beef up his security and doing all these different business kind of lectures and just like really getting things, on the ship tightened up. And one of the things that he asked Ross was, does anybody know that you're the person that's operating this site? And Ross said, there's two people. And he said, okay, you need to go and tie up loose ends with them and get away from them because you don't want
tell
them.
you're done.
Yeah.
Cut it off.
Cut it off. You don't want them to know that you are this, mastermind behind this operation.
Yeah.
So what Ross did was he went and he said that he sold the Silk Road off and that, there was a new owner and that he was done with it and he was just going to move away and just change his life. So he moved to San Francisco. Well, at this point, there was starting to show a lot of interest into the Silk Road. The Silk Road had been selling, you know, to the authorities' eyes. The Silk Road had been doing like, you know, a little bit here and there because that's what they were coming across in the mail.
Yeah.
They were finding these envelopes, you know, with like 2 pills or something like that, and they just were brushing it off, but it just started happening so regularly that they were like, okay, where the fuck is this shit coming from,
Yeah,
right?
all of a sudden.
Yeah, and they're kind of baffled by it. Well, there was a guy named Jared Deeryagan, and he was like this dude that was always trying to, kind of like Ross actually, kind of be something. He wanted his life to be a legend. You know, he always wanted to be in the military, but never had these like opportunities to be in there. And he was working in the Homeland Security in the mail division, you know, and so he was feeling extremely like down. And then he starts seeing these pills so regularly, and he just is like, there's something to this. And that's when he started to recognize what the Silk Road was. And he did this because he was able to bust somebody that had a small amount of ecstasy delivered to them. He was stationed out of Chicago, and he had come to his supervisor, and he was like, look, there's something going on. I keep on getting these pills here and there. And the supervisor's like, look, I'm not going to send you out to another state to bust somebody over 2 pills. But if there's anything like this that comes to Chicago where you can drive out there and do
Controlled delivery.
there we go, controlled delivery, then I should be really familiar with that.
Seems that it happened to us.
Yeah. So he says, you know, like if there's anything in Chicago, you can go out and do a controlled delivery. And so finally the day comes where there was one in Chicago. He does a controlled delivery, and it's like these college students, you know.
Yeah.
And the college students are like, look, dude, we just got it off the website, the Silk Road. And
Yeah.
he's like, what the fuck is the Silk Road? And at this point, no LEOs, law enforcement officers, knew what the Silk Road was.
Yeah.
It was just like this, like,
Too new.
total, like, what? You know, like, dumbfounded moment. And it was just, you know, for Carl Deeryagan, he thought this was for sure his golden ticket, you know. He thought, man, if I can figure out a way to take down this Silk Road site, which won't be hard at all because it's just a website, right?
Right.
And that's what his whole, that was like his view on it. He's like, if I can just take it down. I know the planes are crazy today. Sorry.
Yeah, we're in it's Bayview days for
Yeah.
the 4th, and it's wild here.
Yeah, there's planes and helicopters and all this weird
Bunch
shit
of
going on.
sirens, parades. Anyways.
Yeah, so he's thinking, I'm gonna be able to take this down. This is gonna boost my career, you know. And he just starts like going after it. But
So wait, he's a male guy
no, he's works for the Department of Homeland Security in the mail department.
in the mail department.
Yeah, so
he is government.
yeah, he is a law enforcement officer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the Department of Homeland Security handles international threats
Right,
coming
okay.
into the borders.
Oh, okay.
So, so he is just like, this is going to boost my career. I need to get behind this. But he comes to his subordinates and he says, you know, like, this is going to be a huge deal. Like, and they're like, oh my God, it's a couple fucking pills. Relax. Okay. You know?
Yeah.
And so his commanding officer didn't really like it at first. They didn't really want him to go into it. And they just thought it was going to be a waste of time. But after these pills continued to come through more and more and more, he was just stashing. Like, this is the funny thing about what he did, because they just were like, oh, it's 2 pills here, 2 pills there. What are you doing? So he just started stashing all these drugs, narcotics, into a bag, basically, like into a box, so that he could bring this entire box to them and say, look, this is thousands of drugs, you know,
After it
hundreds of
accumulates.
thousands.
Yeah, smart.
And I mean, that's only a couple months, right? So, and you guys have to keep in mind that the amount of mail that was seized in comparison to the amount of mail that was delivered
True.
through the Silk Road is insanely small. It's so small. It's such a minor amount. It's probably under 10%, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, most of it got delivered.
yeah, most of it got delivered. So he, comes to subordinates with this, and he says, I really want to get involved in this. This is something that is a big deal for me. And so he gives him the go ahead. He says, okay, I'm going to let you take this on, and so the case file is opened on the Silk Road, right? So he starts investigating it for a couple months, and he is just like the definition of a good cop. He like is honest and
Like has good intentions.
Yeah, has good intentions, just really wants to boost his career.
Wants to save the world, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, so he's investigating this, and meanwhile, like shifting a little bit over, this site is growing, and there's, by this point, let's say we're, 6 months to a year into it. There's millions of dollars monthly being spent on this website, right?
Yeah.
Something that the police had no idea about. They were completely oblivious to the amount of traffic that was on this site. So they start to, the site starts to grow, and Ross is like talking to Variety Jones, and Variety Jones is like, look, you need to get some staff to help us with this, some security experts, some people that can be on the offense for when people are trying to steal from you. Because Ross had dealt with a lot of people that were trying to embezzle money.
Yeah.
He had dealt with a lot of attacks on the Silk Road where they would shut down the Silk Road and ask for a ransom. And I mean, I do remember that too.
Yeah.
They, did lots of attacks on his servers and were just constant.
Blackmailing him.
Yeah, blackmailing him. And so Ross is like, okay, well, how am I going to get employees for this, right? So he had a forum on there, and he starts sending out forums like looking for this and looking for that. And so he starts to hire employees. And part of his whole deal is with hiring employees is that, I'll pay you this much money per month. And it was a pretty good salary. I want to say it was like $5,000 a month, I think was the starting salary. So it was pretty decent. And he says, like, look, I'm going to pay you this much, but you have to send me your identification, your address, everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to send you shit.
Yeah.
You have to trust me that I will keep this safe, but I want to know what you're doing, what you're up to, where you live. And so he was able to get a lot of people working for him, and so during this period of time, Ross had like kind of expanded the business, and Variety Jones was like, okay, now you really need to get a pseudonym, something where people can like identify you as like what you are. And I think the perfect name for you is Dread Pirate Roberts. And Dread Pirate Roberts was a fictional character out of, I think it's called the
Princess Bride.
yeah. And Dread Pirate Roberts was this character that was like a pirate that was never one pirate. So he was unstoppable. The pirate always like...
His legacy lived on. So
Right.
it actually, it never died. And it was never one person.
Right. So multiple people could be Dread Pirate Roberts. If one of them died, somebody else would take over this identity
Right.
and continue with the
Immortal.
the legacy. And so it was perfect because who knew what the future held for Ross? He might sell it eventually or, do something like that.
And just the fact that, it gives off that connotation that it's not a real person. Maybe it's multiple people. Like, it really kind of plays into, like, not knowing who he is,
Right. Well, Dread Pirate Roberts had got this name, and his I don't want to say his fan base, but his following, which he had a very heavy following with this website. The people that were on his website that trusted him and thought he was a genius because of his posts, that they had just totally embraced this. They called him the captain of the ship and all these, like kind of boosted his ego a lot. He really took this identity on. Dread Pirate Roberts Ross was this like white collar kind of, libertarian white kid. He was really young who, just like, just kind of floated by and stayed out of the
kind of
limelight.
mundane.
Yeah. But Dread Pirate Roberts was this badass movement leader who was, like untouchable and
changing the world.
And he had all this envisionment and, he really just took this identity on. Well, there's a new officer that we should introduce, and his name's Carl Force. And Carl Force was a Baltimore police officer working for the DEA. and he had, kind of the same thing. He had been doing these big drug cases, but just lost interest in it. And the spark of his career was kind of gone. He turned into a little bit of an office bitch and just wasn't very happy. So he was looking for his big next move to become, a better officer and substantiate his career. He had been doing it for a long time and was just bored. So he heard about the Silk Road, and it just ignited a fire in him. He was like, I'm going to be the guy that takes down Dread Pirate Roberts, right? Kind of like or kind of like Jared Duryagan. So Force was came to his superiors and said, I think that if I make a website or a identity on the Silk Road, I'm going to be able to really communicate with them, and I can tell them that I'm, this badass, like, international drug dealer who's just does in big weight, so we can kind of see what this guy is working with, right? And so he goes on there, he creates this identity, and he just slowly builds into this persona of just, this big international drug dealer who is looking for a better means to get drugs and wants, a better trading route and all these things. And Ross starts to really trust this guy. And so now Ross is talking to a DEA agent, right? Mm. And this DEA agent is just, he's like starting to really get engrossed in this. He's really like taking on this identity of this drug dealer, and he loves it, right? He just feels like the man that he never was. I mean, he really does. He feels like, he feels like this embodied, like, huge drug kingpin with millions of dollars and like swagger and whatever. So, part of his whole thing was, I'm going to like see what this guy's working with. So he does a couple of transactions on the Silk Road and is able to get like large quantities of drugs, kilos, right? And they were for a pretty decent price. I think he paid $40,000 a kilo or something. And he was able to get a bunch. And so they knew that this website was dealing with not just a couple pills here and there, but this website was dealing with large quantities as well. Mm-hmm. And so after a while, he says to DPR, he says, what do you think that I could buy this website from you from and just take it over, see what it is? Because they wanted to see, what the site owner valued it at.
Right.
And so he says, like, what kind of number are you thinking of? And he throws out a number to Ross, and it was like, I think 10 million, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, Ross is like, no, thanks, not interested.
Not interested in selling.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. Well, no, not interested in 10 million. 10 million is not it, And the guy's like, well, what about 100 million? Right. And Ross is like, nope, not interested.
Damn.
Yeah. And so this dude's like, go. Like, he's like, holy shit. If he's not interested in taking $100 million for this site, site must be
confident that the future also is going to produce mass amounts of money.
Yeah, exactly. So Ross says to him, if I was going to sell it, you'd have to add a zero on that.
Damn.
Like billion, And everybody in the office is just like sitting back in their chairs like, what the fuck are we dealing with?
Right.
So then they tell him, look, if we're going to do this, if I do this, I want to see proof of your transactions. I want to see what you're doing, because they want to get more information. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. He's not interested in showing them that. And he says, but this is what I'm willing to do it at. And you can either trust that it's worth that or not. But they kind of were doing like their own analysis to try to see what the site was worth. Mm-hmm. And by this point, they started to realize that this is $1 billion, industry.
Drug empire. I mean,
and
services.
Yeah. And they're just like really like starting to understand what this snake is like, what this beast is,
And it is big, my friends.
Yeah. And so at this point, they start to bring in more other officers, other agencies to try to like get more people on board. And
You mean from like other like the IRS,
the FBI,
yeah,
you know,
FBI,
yeah,
like all these different groups.
right. Well, they finally found a way where, because of Carl Force's like pseudonym that was, you know, this badass drug kingpin or whatever, they found a guy that was like one of Ross's right-hand man, and they were able to perform a controlled delivery on him. And when they performed the controlled delivery on him, they realized that this dude has access to everything, you know? And this guy's name was Curtis Green.
And he got busted with a controlled delivery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his name was Curtis Green. And Curtis Green was kind of a, you know, a lot of times when you look at these drug dealer types, you think of, you know, like the flashy cars, the big rims, whatever, right? Well, Curtis Green wasn't that. He was an older man who had a lot of medical conditions, couldn't afford to pay for his Oxycontin prescriptions, and was getting Oxycontin and, you know, painkillers for his medical conditions, allegedly.
Had a family.
Yeah, he had a family. He was getting these from this website. So through the course of the time, you know, there was the jobs that had opened up, and he decided to take one. Well, his job was basically customer service, and he was able to communicate with the customers and deal with the money that was in escrow. So when they did this controlled delivery and Carl Force was there, Carl Force, you know, they go in there, they bust him, and he's just like, please don't, you know, don't release my name publicly. Like if anybody knows that I was busted, I'm going to have like problems. This guy DPR is no joke. Like
he has millions. He's going to kill me.
He's going to kill me. And he's like, I'll do whatever you guys need. And Carl's like, okay, well, work with us, you know? And, but while Carl was over there, he's looking at his laptop, and he realizes that all of these Bitcoins were just sitting there. And so Carl transfers these Bitcoins into his Bitcoin wallet.
Oh, this is the dirty cop.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, the Baltimore cop.
This story is fucking crazy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that we're going to leave out because, I mean, if to really dive deep into this, I mean, you just have, this would be a fucking 20-hour podcast, right?
We'll link an audiobook.
Yeah.
For all those details.
Yeah. So,
it's a good book.
Yeah. So Carl Force, you know, he sees this opportunity to steal from the Dread Pirate Roberts and this Curtis Green fellow. And he transfers, I want to say his first transfer was like $500,000 worth of Bitcoins. Yeah, the first one. There's more.
That's insane.
So the first one, I think it was like 500. It could have been more than that, but I think it was 500,000 was the first amount. Because when you do commit illegal, you know, crimes, you always put your toe in first. But that's a big fucking toe.
See what you can get away with.
Yeah. And so
that's a big toe.
That's a very big toe. So he transfers 500,000 into his pocket or his wallet, and now it doesn't look like Carl Force did that. It looks like Curtis Green did that, right? The guy that this poor guy that was right hand to the infamous DPR.
Yeah.
And who sees it right away? DPR. So DPR is like, oh my God, this guy just stole $500,000 from me, right?
Damn.
Yeah. And he is just fucking pissed. So he's talking to Carl Force, the guy that fucking stole this money. DPR is talking to his pseudonym, this like badass drug dealer. And he's like, oh my God, I just had this guy steal money from me. And it's fucking him, basically, right? And he's like, I just had this guy steal money from me. Like, have you ever dealt with a situation like this? And what would you do? Because he was like looking to this big drug dealer that has been in this situation before. And he's like, well, sometimes you have to get physical with these guys. You know, like you got to like show them who's boss, basically, and try to get the money back. And so, DPR like thinks about it. He's like, that's not really me. You know, talks to Variety Jones a little bit about it, and Variety Jones like, look,
so Carl the bad cop is persuading him to get physical.
Yes.
That dang dude.
Yeah, no morals. So Variety Jones is like, look, man, like you're at the point right now, like you're running a multi-billion-dollar industry, like you can't just let people continue to walk over you, you know. And Ross has, at this point, he's so frustrated because he has been like, you know, He's had money stolen from him from hackers. He's had hackers put down his site and steal money from him by, not embezzling, but
Yeah.
threatening him.
Yeah,
Like
blackmailing.
blackmailing him.
He's been fucked with a
And
lot.
he's been fucked with, and he's just tired of it. He doesn't know what to do. So he hits up.
And he's not a gangster by nature. I mean,
no, not at all. I mean, that's his thing, right? It's liberty.
Yeah,
He doesn't
liberty.
want to hurt anybody. That's like
Yeah.
part of his thing. But at this point, he's fucking fed up, and he's got this big time drug dealer that he's working with that
and he
can.
has a lot of persuasion.
Yeah, and so he's got kind of all these little birds chirping in his ear, like, like do it, And so he, so he hits up Carl Force's pseudonym, and he's like, look, do you know anybody? Do you know any like high rollers that can, beat this guy up? And he's like, I know some Hell's Angels guys that'll go out there and do it. And so he's like, okay, let's do it. How much? And it was like, I think $50,000 or something. So he pays him $50,000, transfer the money into Carl Force's fucking Bitcoin wallet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
I think it was 80.
for the first one, I think
Oh.
it could have been 80, but I thought it was 50, but I could be wrong.
Well,
So
whatever.
yeah, so
Give or take 30,000.
yeah, which is nothing to him because he's a multimillionaire at this point, right? So he transferred the money into Carl Force's wallet, and then Carl Force has this fucking guy
Yeah.
with him.
Jesus.
So he's able to make it look like they roughed him up, right?
Yeah.
All they
no
had,
shit.
yeah, it's like perfect. And so he's able to like wait 2 days, like roughs this guy up in quotation marks, like puts fucking ketchup on him or what fake shit they do. I don't know.
Does he actually do that?
I don't know if it's ketchup, but
Oh.
they did
They made him look beat.
made him look like he was
Dead.
beat up dead
Yeah.
inside of a bathtub.
Oh my gosh.
And,
what?
Yeah. And they took videos of them like pretending to drown him.
Oh
And
my
and
God.
this is totally illegal too.
Of course.
None of his superiors knew that they were doing this.
Yeah.
And the guy, Curtis Green, is just like traumatized from this, right?
Yeah.
Because
Aw.
because he's being like fake drowned, which is like being real drowned. I mean,
It
yeah,
is.
you know what I
To
mean?
him
Like,
it is.
yeah, like if you're being drowned, whether it's fake or real or whatever, your
Yeah,
head's
like,
submerged in
it's
water. It's gonna
still
be
happening.
fucking scary.
Yeah.
And so this poor dude is like, like he was just framed and now he has to play dead.
Yeah.
And he still doesn't realize that Carl Force stole this money,
Oh yeah.
which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't even know that Carl Force stole his money. So he thinks that DPR is tripping over nothing,
Dang.
which is crazy. I mean, so it's just this like you're like, okay, you're the cop that's supposed to be taking down the bad guy.
Right.
And in my opinion, you're doing something worse than what the bad guy is doing.
Absolutely. And you're completely trapping.
Yeah, it's entrapment.
Them.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean-
crazy.
Wow.
So now DPR's got like 1 kill under his belt, right? He didn't feel good about it, but he was able to like shove those emotions down
Yeah.
and just deal with it. But he's so stressed. He's like, I need to get the fuck out of here. So he goes to Australia for a little bit, and kind of like to try to take his mind off of the situation that's going on. And he just can't relax. He's like having like nonstop panic attacks, and Variety Jones is trying to coach him through meditation techniques and things like that. And so he just like realizes that he needs to get back to the States because he never had real stable internet connections over there. He was having a lot of I think he went to Thailand too, if I remember correctly. But so he was always like fighting this internet connection. Every time he was going to a cafe, he had to like really like hide his shit, and he
yeah.
was just
It's probably pretty stressful.
yeah, it was really stressful.
being,
Like
a new
that.
place and
Yeah, that on top of all these security breaches and things that were
Yeah.
going on, it was just too stressful for him. So he went back to San Francisco. Well, while he's back in San Francisco, he now has, he's just got tons of heat on him. He's got the FBI, he's got the IRS, he's got the DEA, he's got the Homeland Security. The president is fucking pissed. Obama was so not into this. You know what I mean?
Damn.
Well, this guy is like, his whole thing was, we're going to take down the government.
Yeah.
We're going to,
He saw freedom without government. I
Yeah.
mean,
And so he was really trying to say that this was the thing that could start the revolution. This
Yeah.
is putting the power back into people's hands.
Right.
I remember reading a post from him one time that was like, you know, the postal service is the government and they are our drug dealers now. You know what I
Wow.
mean? It was
Yeah.
just total ballsy like
Yeah.
attitude, right? So he's got all, I mean, now you're not only are you doing something crazy illegal, but throughout your time doing it, you're like basically laughing at the police. Like, you guys aren't shit.
And they take that stuff real personal.
Oh yeah, they did. And so they got every fucking department on this. And this came
Yeah.
into like, you know, these department heads were like, we need to take this guy down.
Yeah.
Well, there was a hole in Ross's security at one point, and there was basically a little, I think it was like 30-minute window while Ross was offline where there was a coding error and it showed his IP address,
Oh.
his real IP address.
Wow.
And it came from a coffee place in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
And so they quickly were able to, because of this, like, quick little breach in the security, they were able to, like, I don't really know how to explain it, but it was kind of like basically take an image of everything on the site, like the back door shit, you know, like the amount of money that was in escrow, like who the players were, like, sorry about the noise if you guys can hear this.
It's wild down there.
yeah.
We're up on the hill too, so everything, all the noise is amplified.
Right.
But anyway.
So yeah, all this, you know, so they were able to get like a digital image of everything that's ever been on the Silk Road
Yeah.
in the back door, right? And they got his
All those
IP address.
Yeah.
They got like bulletins of like,
I wonder how.
and well, and here's the crazy thing. They also, while they did this, were able to get a picture of his laptop. So like
his screen laptop.
yeah. So
what was on his screen.
What was on his
Yeah.
screen. And one of the things that they noticed that was on his screen was like, so they now know that this Dread Pirate Roberts was in a coffee place in
Yeah.
allegedly Dread Pirate Roberts, because they don't really know that there's one guy or whatever, but they know that whoever was the admin at that day
Yeah.
was in a coffee place in San Francisco, and that his computer was called Frosty,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So Ross panics, gets this thing back in order. You know, there was a
So he knows what happened.
he didn't know that they got this much information, but he did know that
There was
a security breach for 30
Okay.
minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And they were
So
able
he was
to.
probably expecting the worst, preparing.
I don't think that he realized that they could do it this quickly.
Okay.
I don't think that he realized what they could do with the information.
Yeah.
But I do think that he was extremely concerned, and
Yeah.
it made him panic. Not panic hard enough though, because if this was me, I would be out of the fucking country. I'd be in
Yeah.
Belize or something. But
Well, yeah, and this whole time Ross did have a really strong presence on social media. You know?
yeah, from his personal accounts.
Yeah, like he was very out there.
Yeah, he talked about a lot of libertarian things,
Yeah.
and I think that it was quite interesting. Like, I'm much more paranoid than that. I would have a really hard time posting my political beliefs on two completely different lives that I'm living.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
You'd have to be super.
yeah, it's like if you loved red Ferraris,
That'd be so
and
stressful.
yeah, you loved red Ferraris, and like you're always like on your personal Facebook page talking about red Ferraris, how much you love them, and then you're also this Dread Pirate Roberts, and then you're like, man, I love red Ferraris, 360 Modinas, that's my jam.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
they
that's
can
like
sync
whoa,
that up
you know, that's so.
at least one day.
So at this point, I think it's time to introduce another character, and this was Tom. Oh my God, I might have forgotten his name. Shit.
I don't know either.
Shit.
Who was he?
Well, he was the IRS dude.
Oh, okay. Can we
Um,
just call him IRS guy?
no, okay, Gary. His name was Gary Alford.
Gary.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
that's right.
had to get it right because I think that these people are really important to the
Gary's
case.
super important.
Yeah, Gary's super important. And at this point, Gary had been he got on this case, and for some reason he took it really personally. He felt like this Dread Pirate Roberts guy was really taking advantage of America and the freedoms. And he was determined. Just like, I mean, you have to think about it, like for cops, like their golden ticket to a successful career is big busts.
Yeah.
You know, and so everybody's like, I want to be the guy that takes down the Silk Road. This
Yeah.
is
Huge.
right? So Gary Alford, he has like somehow Gary really he was able to like kind of use he thought about like Elliot Ness and these guys that captured, you know, big time criminals like Al Capone, and was thinking about like, how did they do it? Well, they didn't do it by catching them in the act. They tried to find loopholes, right? So he did a quick Google search for a specific date range and was able to find like one of the first posts that anybody had ever made about the Silk Road.
Yeah, like mentioned it.
Right. And the first time was on this Shroomery thing, right? And the post was made by someone named Altoid. And Altoid had posted on there, which was Ross, and his post was...
It wasn't Frosty, it was Altoid?
No, yeah, it wasn't Frosty, it was Altoid.
Okay.
Altoid had posted on there, you know, like, something like, you know, have you guys ever heard about the Silk Road? It's this place where you can buy drugs, whatever. So he was like, okay, well, this is the first post that I can find. I'm going to investigate this a little bit. So he gets a subpoena to scavenge this website. And like look at user emails, and everything from Altoid had been pretty much deleted, except that he had communicated with another guy, and that guy didn't delete it. And in this email to and from that guy, he had said, I'm looking for a good programmer, and if you could have them contact me at rossolbricht@gmail.com, that'd be great.
Damn.
So he was like, Ross Ulbricht, who the fuck is that? So he does a quick Google search and finds Ross's like Facebook and Twitter and all that shit.
Yeah, just this nice guy.
Yeah.
He's going to college, you know.
And to him, he's
into
like
physics,
and
like,
well, and libertarianism, right?
Libertarian.
And that was a big deal. So he was like,
But people laughed at the thought that Ross could even be considered for that.
Yeah.
For DPR.
Yeah. And but
he
he
saw
knew
something.
it.
He
He
saw-
knew
yeah,
it.
he
He
saw
knew it
kind of
right
through
away.
that.
Yeah, he was like, this is the guy.
Yeah, he's like the perfect you know.
Yeah. And so he's like, okay, this is definitely the guy. There's something here.
Yeah.
And he goes to his superiors and they
I
just
kind
laugh.
of like Gary.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of.
And he goes to his superiors and he gets laughed
Which is
at.
smart.
And they're like, dude, this like little white kid that
Right.
doesn't have any programming experience. He's never had a single crime charged against him or anything. And you think this is the, you know, the biggest kingpin basically in the world right now. And they're like laughing at him. He's like, I just think it is. But they told him to go in a different direction. They told him that's not our guy. Let's look somewhere else. And so he had Ross in the back of his head, and he started looking at other people, and just nothing seemed to make sense. Well, there's this office that's been set up at the DEA headquarters in DC, and at this office they have several different agents working at this, and they've got
Talk a little closer, baby.
They've got all of these agents working together, and they have, you know, this like whiteboard that has all of the information from the site and all this stuff. And you know, there was a you know, a screenshot of his computer, and it was called Frosty's MacBook. Well, when Gary saw that, it just threw a light bulb off on him, because when he had been searching the personal you know, Facebook accounts and all these things, he noticed that Ross Ulbricht had used the name Frosty in different blogs and things like that. And he was like, this is our fucking guy.
Yeah.
You know? And so he brought it to his commanding officer again, and the commanding officer was like, still not buying it.
Right.
And he's like, oh my God, what? Or how can you not be buying this? This dude is our fucking guy,
At least
right?
be a little like curious.
Yeah. And so there's like, just bring me more information. So he goes back into his office and he is like, what else can I do? What else can I do? I guess maybe there's something I missed. So he goes to, you know, this lady that works in the office. He's like, do a background check on him again and see if there's anything. And she looks up and she's like, there was just a hit a couple weeks ago. The Department of Homeland Security in San Francisco went to his house, and he had 9 fake IDs, you know, and it says in the file that when they asked him about it, he said, look, I know nothing about these 9 fake IDs, but if someone were to try to obtain these, the easiest way for them to obtain these would be by using this website called the Silk Road.
Why would he say that?
Because he's empowered.
Yeah.
He thinks that he's untouchable.
Yeah.
And he
Damn.
loves the fact that he's behind this.
Oh yeah, he loves that.
You know?
People don't know it's him.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
like this whole like weird dynamic of like hidden intentions.
mhm.
So they
Damn, Ross.
yeah. So now he goes back into his commander's office and he's like, look, this dude just got popped with 9 fucking fake IDs. Who needs 9 fake IDs and passports?
Mention the Silk Road.
Yeah, and passports. And then he's like, okay, well, let's look at where this house is. And he zooms in, and the house was 2 blocks from the coffee stand that they got the IP address from.
Yeah.
And his captain just stands up and he's like, holy shit, you know, this is
You're
our
right.
this is our guy. You're right. So what do we need to do now? Let's set up surveillance, right? So they set up the surveillance, and while they set up a surveillance, they also have another officer that sets up an account where he's communicating with Ross. And that way they can monitor when Ross is on his computer, and they can watch Ross be on his computer, or when DPR is on his computer and see that Ross is also on the computer. So they start monitoring for a few weeks, and sure enough, every time that DPR is logged on and talking to these guys, Ross is, you know, sitting in front of his laptop. So he is looking really guilty at this point.
Yeah.
And so they get him on a plane to go out there, and they're like, this is our guy. We know this is our guy. Now we need to arrest him and, you know, charge him. But we have to do it a certain way, because they had just dealt with the computer hacker recently who had they knew it was this big infamous computer hacker, but when they raided his house to bust him, he was able to quickly close his laptop and it encrypted the entire thing, and they were never able to get any information off of his laptop. So
Yeah.
this is extremely sensitive. You have to be able to, when you raid the house, you have to be able to get the laptop away, right? With it open, and he can't touch it. You have to figure out a way to do that. So if you can imagine like raiding a house and having someone just, especially if they're on their laptop, because that's the other thing too. You need them to be on the laptop, on the site as an admin in
Yeah.
every important part of the
Yeah.
website to prove that it's him.
Needs to be a slam dunk.
Yeah. So they are come up with this idea, but the SWAT team in California is like, look, we're going to raid his house. This is how we're going to do it. And they're like, this isn't the way to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So they plan on doing it. Let's say it's on a Tuesday. Okay. It was October 1st of 2013, but I don't know what day of the week that was. So let's say it was on a Tuesday that they were planning on doing it. So they had been watching his house and surveilling him, and they're like, okay, we're getting ready for this raid, you know, and they're going over everything. Well, while this is happening, they're surveilling the house, and Ross is in his house, and he decides that I need to go to a coffee shop and work for a little bit and download Breaking Bad. And I'm serious. And
No, I know.
yeah, and
It's a good show.
yeah, it's a great show. Well, it's actually just an interview with the writer, but so he gets up, leaves his house, he's strolling along the sidewalk, and as he's doing this, he's passing cops, right?
Yeah.
2 of the cops are actually in the coffee shop that Ross was planning to go. And so they exit the coffee shop thinking that he might go there, and they want to surveil from the outside. And Ross goes inside this coffee shop. It was called Bello. And Ross goes inside this coffee shop, and he looks around. It's too busy. There's too many people in there. And part of his rule is that he needs to be able to have his back to the wall,
Where
and
no one can see his computer.
where no one can see his laptop. And so he's like, there's too many people in this, but I know that the library across the street has really good internet. So he is looking around, and the cops are like, he's looking for a place with high speed internet. He's going to do his work, right? And so they make the decision to pull the trigger on this. And this is the New York team, and the San Francisco team isn't there, which is like a really ballsy call, because you know, basically you're saying we're gonna go in and bust this guy without SWAT, you know, and
I mean, he's
go
kind of breaking the rules. He's
yeah,
going
completely
against
going
his
against his orders.
bosses, yeah.
And so Ross goes into the library, gets on his laptop, and you know, the undercover police officer is, I think it's Drew Yagan, is sitting there chatting with them online. and he's asking him, hey, can you do me a favor and check on this, like this complaint that's in this thing and see what's going on with it. And so that way that they know that he's in a certain part of the administrator that only DPR can be in.
Yeah.
And so he says, yeah, I'll take a look at it, right? So he gets in there, and once DPR is in there and he starts asking him about this complaint or whatever, he's able to tell the guys, look, we know that he's in there. You need to act now, right? Well, there was an Asian woman who had sat across from Ross at the library just to like read a book or whatever. And then there was two other agents that had come in, and they started like a fist altercation, and one of the guys made it look like he was going to hit this girl. And so Ross looked up startled to see what was going on. And as he looked up, the Asian girl across from him slid his laptop over to the left, and then an officer went up and grabbed Ross's arms from behind him and put him in kind of like a chokehold.
So wait, the lady was in on it?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so this officer comes up behind Ross, puts him in kind of like a chokehold, so he can't move his arms, he can't close his laptop or anything.
Wow.
And pulls him up and tells him he's under arrest. And then, mission successful. They were able to get Ross's laptop plugged in immediately.
Yeah.
And keep it open and keep it from freezing. Because, if the fucking
Right.
screen goes dark or anything, they're
Yeah.
fucked, right? Because they know that this thing is like super secure. And so they're able to like quickly get everything on his laptop transferred onto another police laptop. And unfortunately, Ross was extremely like, he loved to write about his life on there.
Yeah,
he had like a
did.
journal, know, and it talked about all of the, like, every day. I mean, he was like, it was nuts.
He wanted someone to write a book about him.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Which
now
he's
they
got
did.
tons. Now he's got
That's
tons.
a really
Yeah.
good book.
Yeah. So Ross, he was arrested and taken to New York, which is where he was going to be tried for his crimes. And in 2013 that he was sentenced?
Yeah. Oh, sentence?
Yeah, or was it 2015? It might have been 2015.
No, because he didn't get caught until 2013
Right,
in October,
yeah.
so it had to have been a little
Yeah,
later.
you're right. It was 2015. So in 2015, in May of 2015, Ross was sentenced to life in prison. So that is the timeline. It's a very long timeline.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get into detail about Ross's life and kind of like the whole dynamic of everything that happened before we started to really discuss, like what our opinion is on it and stuff like that. But here's my opinion on a couple things. I mean, first of all, this fucking guy, Carl Forrest, and there was another cop from Baltimore. I can't think of his name right now because I didn't really care. But there's two officers that were caught embezzling money from Ross.
How much time did they get served?
One of them got 5 and one of them got 3.
And then Ross gets a lifetime.
Yeah. Carl Forrest got 5 years.
Damn.
If I remember correctly. No, he got 72 months. So that's 6 years. Yeah.
Not long enough.
Not long enough. 6 years. And in
Especially
federal
just,
prison,
like-
you get out quicker than that.
As a cop, I mean,
Yeah.
you are trusted to uphold the law.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And
It's
what's
so
crazy is,
fucked up.
to me, it was like, this guy had been really just fucking with Ross the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, he had been pushing Ross into this wall, of like,
Yeah.
where Ross,
charges.
yeah, where Ross basically like he just emboldened Ross. He made Ross think that he needed to do a bunch of things that he probably normally wouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that it's not Ross's fault.
No, and I mean the Silk Road did bring a lot of negative shit, like child porn and assassinations and like crazy stuff that
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's really okay with, but at the same time, like, I don't know.
Wow.
I think stealing from him, that's just as bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
and entrapping him.
yeah, and the thing is like,
Because they took it personal at that point.
yeah,
And that's not right as a cop. Like,
No,
you should
yeah.
never take it personal.
yeah, when you're a criminal, and this is just from experience, but when you do things like I have a long history for those of you that don't know, I used to sell drugs and stuff like that. But when you don't know, like when I don't know, when you're standing up from the outside looking in at crime or selling drugs or doing what Ross did, it's really easy to vilify somebody and just say that guy is, a criminal and
Drug
he's
lord,
drug
yeah.
lord, whatever. But you don't realize that things escalate, and just like what happened to Ross is what happened to Carl Force.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he went into this like with good intentions,
True.
and he got into this and he started to slowly steal. And then it turned into this thing where he had $6.6 million worth of Bitcoins that he had stolen. And
Because he probably justified it too. Like, oh, he's just a criminal.
oh yeah.
Like, I can
Well, I
steal
mean, he
from a
says that.
criminal.
Yeah, he literally says that. And
And he's doing criminal things.
yeah,
So
and
fucking twisted.
well, and with Ross, it's like when Ross started this, it wasn't like he thought, I'm going to start this thing. It's going to turn into a multi-billion-dollar organization.
And I'm going to kill some people.
And I'm going to have people killed, because
Yeah.
but that's just what happened. It was like 2 years of, constant progression with large amounts of people and large amounts of money and power and all of these things. And you see your website in every fucking article that there is. And it's just like this crazy, like, fast paced, like
Wow.
you have to make split decisions. And,
you get so high off that feeling, though.
oh yeah,
You totally
absolutely.
would.
Yeah. And so I just, in my opinion, I think that he was charged extremely heavily. I don't think that he should be in there for life.
Well, yeah. And weren't you saying that there's tons of other websites just like
Yeah.
this today?
Yeah. So, I mean, after the Silk Road closed down, like within days, there was the Silk Road 2.0 with a new
Wow.
guy running it.
Yeah.
And then that one closed down. There's Silk Road 3.0. And then there's like this farm, I think it was like called Farm Place or something like that, which was like
Yeah.
the Silk Road. And now there's like 20.
So they were making an example out of him.
Yeah, they were making an example out of him, but it didn't stop anybody. I mean, there's
No,
literally,
exactly.
there are
Nothing
literally,
does.
dozens of them currently. I mean, every
And
time that one gets shut down, two more pop up,
And I mean, I like his intentions.
Yeah.
Free economics. Like,
Yeah.
I really respect all that.
Yeah, and I mean,
I
you have to
there
think about it.
should be personal freedom.
Yeah,
as long as
but
you're not hurting
also,
other people.
I mean, think about how much safer it is as a user to buy things off of this website. Because if you're
Yeah.
a user, you're going to buy drugs. That's just
Yeah.
the way it is. If you're a drug addict,
You're
like
gonna
you're
get it.
going to get it.
It happens.
And the way that you're going to get it is two ways. Either way one is that you can deal with a sketchy drug dealer who's going to be cutting your shit. He's going to be cutting your shit.
yeah.
You
getting other
never
chemicals
know.
in there.
Yeah, you never know what you're getting every time. It's always inconsistent. Sometimes you have to deal with shady characters that might rob you. You're dealing with them in person, so they have the ability to rob you.
Yeah, or hurt you
Or
physically.
hurt you physically. Yeah, put a gun to your head, kill
Right.
you, whatever. You could get wrapped up in the wrong situation. Or option 2 is to go through a website like this where it has a rating system that you know that you're getting something high quality, and there's people that have given reviews, and
Yeah, there's
there's-
security there.
they might have like 20,000 transactions or something like that, so they know that it's safe to buy through this person. You're not going to lose money. This person's going to, they know that it's safe. Their money's being held in escrow, so you don't have to worry about it getting robbed. And there's just,
I mean, it's kind of like Etsy. Like, some vendors are going to give you a refund if you're not happy with it.
Right.
You send it back. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the government could be making so much money on regulating drugs.
right. And so that's
And it would be so much safer.
yeah. And that's the thing is, it's like, okay, what did Ross do? I mean, really, what did he do? He created a website that multiple people sold drugs on, but he didn't sell. I mean, he did sell mushrooms in the beginning. I'm
Yeah,
not trying to say he didn't sell
right.
drugs. He did sell mushrooms in the beginning, but towards the end, he wasn't selling drugs. He was just regulating,
just created
moderating a
this
website,
place.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Where
I
people
know
could.
so many people that sell drugs and or sold drugs in the past,
Yeah.
and they, like they're not, and that have gotten caught, and they're not serving life in prison, and they sold much more large quantities than Ross's mushroom experiment did.
Right.
And Ross is just creating something, and I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that he should get time. I'm not saying that he's innocent at all. Obviously, I'm not saying that he's innocent. Okay. And I do believe that there has to be some sort of, law or whatever.
Regulation or
Regulation.
something. Yeah.
I don't think that he deserved life.
Fuck no.
And I think that it's really sad because he was so young when he did this. And I'm 28, right?
He was charged when he was 28. You're 27.
Okay, yeah, I'm 27. And so he was younger than I am now when he started this.
Right.
And I can honestly say that, like, with the things that I've done in my life and, the mistakes I've made and things like that, like, looking at it now, I'm just like, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, I can look at it from this, like...
Yeah, from 3 years ago.
Yeah, from this older, more mature standpoint where I've given
Which
it
3
up.
years is
and,
not that long
no,
of a
3
time.
years is nothing.
Yeah.
But I can look at it from this, like, older perspective, like, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, obviously I shouldn't do this. I'm not going to ever do this again. This changed my
You
life,
learn.
right?
Yeah.
And this was, like, this wasn't like some, like, radicalized moment or something. This was just me coming to my conclusions.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, if you would have sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison, 10, which I think is reasonable.
Yeah.
I personally think 10 years, I wouldn't have been bitching if he got 10 years.
No.
If or shit, 15, okay? I think
Yeah.
15 is
Just
the most.
Have
But
some sort of life where you can grow afterwards.
exactly.
I
But
mean,
if you
he's not like useless now. Like,
no, and he's extremely intelligent.
So
I mean, if he would have
smart.
gotten 15 years of prison or 10 years of prison, he would have walked out of there with a completely changed view, probably a huge respect for the law, right?
maybe.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Or he would have gone into politics with his libertarian,
yeah, who knows?
party, and who
Yeah.
knows?
And it's really sad to me because, like, when you do these things and you make these decisions and you fuck up, it all happens so fast, and you don't realize, like, where it could go until it goes there. And then you realize, oh my God, I'm in love with this girl, Julia. I just lost her, right?
Mm-hmm.
My family, I lost them
Yeah.
forever, for
And
life
his
now.
family was shocked. They had
Yeah.
no idea. His parents were like, "You must have the wrong guy. There's no way. That's our
Right.
son."
Yeah.
I
It's
mean, I
crazy.
feel bad for his parents. Real
Yeah.
bad. They seem like really cool people.
Yeah. So I was thinking maybe that we tell our story.
Oh, sure. I mean, we already got charged for it. Case closed.
Yeah, it's case closed. So we
So-
don't have anything to worry about.
It was also in 2013, the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Well, I heard about Silk Road prior to that, though, years prior to that, and I had always wanted to use it because at the time I had been selling drugs. I sold drugs for a majority of my youth, and like, and it is what it is, right?
Right.
It's the past, but and so it was like when I first heard of the Silk Road, I was like, that is definitely some government ran shit. I would never do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But-
it seems sketchy at first.
Yeah.
Like, no way, I'm not buying that online.
Yeah. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, after a couple of years, I had dealt with kind of the same problems that I was just talking about, dealing with shady characters, having guns pointed at you or whatever, and being robbed.
Yeah, getting,
Poor quality,
not even poor quality, but the wrong stuff.
the wrong stuff.
And,
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So
Bad shit happens from that.
yeah. And so I was a little fed up, and I had heard of friends that had a lot of success with the Silk Road. So my first Silk Road purchase that I ever bought, I bought 100 grams of MDMA just to try it out, just to see what I could, do or whatever.
Let's remember, though, that this will be out there for, like, ever. So
Yeah. Well,
keep our story a little,
it is what it is. So, and it was successful.
My mom might listen to this.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, Mom.
yeah, sorry. But I don't know. I'm not ashamed of it, dude.
I'm not either.
Yeah, it's the past. I mean, what are we going to do?
Dude, we learned from it, and
Yeah.
we don't do anything
It
fucking
shaped
illegal now.
it shaped us, dude. Like, it
Yeah.
was a huge part of our growing. So anyways, so we ordered that, and we got it for a really good price. I think we paid $1,300 for it. And maybe it's $1,800, but whatever. So we got it for a pretty good price, and it was super successful, extremely high quality. It was really easy to do. And so we were able to get rid of it quickly, and then after that, it was like, okay, why wouldn't I do this, right?
Yeah.
So we did several more orders, and it was all pretty successful. And then one day, I remember this because I had gotten so fucking paranoid before this. I mean, it was like we were living in a nightmare. I was just
The most stressful
yeah.
nightmare that you can't get out of.
Yeah, and it had a lot to do with me reading, you know, how the feds handled these kinds of cases with international
controlled deliveries.
Yeah, controlled deliveries, and I had been researching what they do and trying to understand like what the police protocol was and all these different angles, so that if anything were to happen to me, because I was all of a sudden taking on this huge amount of risk, you know, ordering things internationally. And I decided that I was going to just, you know, I was going to just be prepared, be as prepared as I could for the situation if it were to happen. So on this last delivery, this last order, what it was different. I knew it was different the moment that I ordered it. I just didn't feel comfortable. The vendor who I was dealing with wasn't willing to send it the way I wanted him to send it. He was just like being extremely difficult, and I had already paid for it, and I was like trying to tell him how to discreetly package it, but he wouldn't listen to me. And then he just sent it out the way I told him not to, and it was so fucking dumb the way he sent it out. And he ended up he dropped these things. It was from Canada. He dropped them into a postal service box in Canada. And the feds had been watching this box because they knew that there was regular deliveries going to this. So they were able to seize these packages at customs in the United States. And so because, the Canada police or whatever were working with the United States police. And when it went to the customs in the United States, they were able to get search warrants for this package. Well, from my perspective, what was going on was this package had been misshipped.
Yeah,
right?
like rerouted.
Rerouted. They made it look like the package, like normally, like it would go from Canada to San Francisco to where we were. And this time it went from Canada to like Maryland, and then it went to Texas. And I was like, okay, something's up. This is fucking fishy, right?
Yeah.
I knew right away. I was like, this isn't right. So I start to research more about like controlled delivery and all this stuff. And I knew that any day now, like we were going to be being surveilled, right? And I couldn't sleep at night. I was like always watching outside. And then the day of it happened, right? So
and you're noticing vehicles outside of our house.
Yeah.
Like 4 or 5 of the same vehicles with like the same license
weird
plate
license
number.
plate numbers. Yeah.
I mean, like the normal person probably wouldn't have noticed it, but it's not like they were that sneaky. Like Eric noticed it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd also know, I had expected them. Like
Yeah.
I was,
You knew it was
yeah,
coming.
I was expecting them. So I am just like, okay, this is it. This is the day that they're going to do a controlled delivery. Right. And we had a motorhome that we were going to get out of, I had some stuff that was being done on it. So we were expected to pick that up at noon. And so I was like, okay, I need to get to a hotel because cops can't raid hotel rooms. And I need to get to a hotel, and then we'll get our motorhome, and I have cash, and we'll just get rid of everything and just take our cash and we'll fucking leave. I don't know where we're going to go, but we're just going to leave. Right. And so that was like our plan. So the police are surrounding my house, and not like they were getting ready to raid, but there's just vehicles everywhere. And I'm like looking outside, and I'm just like, I call a really good friend of mine, ask him, I was like, dude, can you please take me to a hotel? I just need a ride out there. I don't want to get pulled over or anything. And so he comes and he picks me up. He takes me to a hotel. I forget my fucking ID, which you need to get a hotel room with. And I didn't want him. And at this point, Kendra was at hot yoga.
I wasn't even home.
Yeah, she wasn't even home. And I had been acting a little crazy, and she thought I was probably just being super paranoid. So I was like, I go back home, and I'm thinking, oh my God, any minute now they're going to come through my door. I need to get my ID, and I need to get back to the hotel and get the hotel room. And so we go in, and Kendra just gets home. She's like, I'm going to take a shower really fast. And I was like, all right, whatever, go ahead and take a shower. And then I'll get ready, and we'll go to the hotel. Right. So she's getting out of the shower when we hear the knock, and it's just U.S. Postal Service, And I was like, I grabbed
And then all Eric says was, "Don't take the package," and then like runs to the back. And
Yeah.
whatever, what are you doing in the back of the house?
I was
Getting
getting rid of
shit.
stuff. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like shoving shit into the soffit of this building, money into the soffit of this like laundry room that we had because I didn't know what else to do. And so I'm like shoving, wads of cash and other things into this like soffit. And I had already like cleaned out my house because I knew that they were going to come. So I had already got rid
House
of,
was clean.
yeah, I got rid of like all the scales and whatever, paraphernalia that we had. And I had that buried outside. And so I'm shoving all this shit into the soffit of this roof. And I hear, "Eric, I have the package." And I was like, fuck. And I was like, what? And I like run to the front of the house and I grab a Sharpie and I like wrote "return to sender" on it and threw it. Did I throw it out the door?
No, I wrote "return to sender." Yeah, you told me to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then did we throw it outside though?
No, we just put it on the counter.
Oh, okay. We put it on the counter, and
We should have thrown it outside.
Yeah, I couldn't remember, but and then like not even 30 seconds after we wrote "return to sender" on it, they bust through our
open,
door.
guns.
Kandra's in a towel. And there's like
Yeah, it was
30 fucking
awful.
cops with drug dogs, and they all have assault rifles, and they're fucking throwing us on the ground, and and they come in there and search our house, and it was like an 8-hour ordeal. And we both we're just like, we're not talking.
Yeah.
And so they literally they search our house, they don't find anything, and they just say,
You
Our-
had some minor things
Ketamine.
on your person.
yeah, I had ketamine and cash. It was like
Yeah.
$3,000 cash on me because I
Yeah.
didn't have enough time to stash the rest of it in the soffit.
They weren't super interested in, but in the end, that's what they ended up charging you with. But they
Right.
didn't find the stuff that you stashed up in the
Yeah.
laundry room.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy to me.
yeah, so
Fuck.
we had like I had 3,000 cash on me that they took, and I had like some I think like 50 grams of ketamine or something.
Yeah.
And so they end up just they take that, they take our statements, which was nothing, and then they say, "All right, we'll be in touch," and they just leave. You know?
They
And-
took our computer, our
Oh yeah, all of our electronics,
camera, phone,
any electronics, period.
yeah.
And so I just remember it was like 8 hours of them searching our house until they left. So it was like night,
Yeah, and they're really cool.
they were really, I would say this, they were the ICE or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that's in the news right now that everybody hates on, but they were the nicest,
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
yeah.
Yeah, they mostly, they said that we were talking to them about like child trafficking and like how their
Yeah.
heart was in it for that reason. And
Yeah, they were
They were
nice.
just super
and we were nice to
cool.
them too. That's the thing. We
Yeah.
were extremely respectful to them. We weren't like, "Fuck you pigs" or whatever. We were, the whole time we were trying to be respectful and,
not make the situation worse.
right, we
'Cause we knew
offered them-
we fucked up.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean, dude,
Yeah.
my whole life was like, well, that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta call my dad and tell him what the fuck happened. Like,
Yeah.
It was just big learning experience.
yeah. And so, and I told them, I was like, like, they leave, they said, "We'll be in touch" or whatever. And I just remember Kandra and I we're just sitting in this empty house. They took all of our electronics, cell phones, all of our money, and we're just sitting on this fucking shitty futon, and we're just sitting there like, what do we do?
Yeah, and we're not talking about it. 'Cause
Yeah,
we're like, what
we
if
were
they
worried that they bugged the
anything?
house or something. So we just we're like, fuck, what do we
Talk
do?
about getting fucked.
Yeah. So we just said, we need to move out of here. I think we moved out the next day.
Yeah, because it was a couple of days until the first. Our landlord was really cool.
Yeah.
I literally told him that our house got raided, and I can't pay, and he gave us our deposit back.
Yeah.
He gave us our freaking deposit back.
Yeah.
He was so nice. He
Yeah.
liked us a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we got normal jobs and we got healthy and we stopped doing drugs.
Yeah, I started working out a lot.
We turned our life completely around. I mean, we
Yeah.
had no other choice. but
Hired a really
to-
shady lawyer.
Yeah, really shady.
Hired a really shady
That
lawyer that
almost
took
made
all
it-
of my money.
That embezzled from us from his company.
Yeah. And told me that the feds dropped the case against me completely.
Oh, I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
So
God.
Kandra and I thought we were in the clear, right? And I mean, this was a big deal. So it was 6 months of every single day I was waking up thinking, is this the day I'm going to go to prison?
Yeah.
Is this the day I'm going to go to prison? Is this the day I'm going to go to prison? And so this entire time I'm thinking that. And then he's like, nope, they dropped the case against you. You don't have to worry about anything, right? Well, then one day I get a phone call from my mother and she's like, the feds are here. They need to come talk to you. You know, they're going to indict you. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, don't worry. Everything's going to work out. Just let them come by your house. And so they come by and they indict me. And I look at the paper and it's a fucking misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's all.
I was like, wait, what? They gave me a possession of ketamine. And ketamine at this time, I think it's a Schedule 1 narcotic now or Schedule 2, but at this time it was Schedule 3. So it was like literally like having like prescription grade ibuprofen, you know?
I have never been so happier to see
Yeah.
a misdemeanor in my
Yeah,
life.
no kidding. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And then I went into court and
They knew.
And they knew. And they said in court they knew. But they didn't have enough evidence.
They also really liked you. And
Yeah.
they're like, you can change, Eric.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And it was cool because I think the moral of the story is like, don't do dumb shit, right? But also like when you're in these situations, you need to be mindful of the fact that you could be potentially putting yourself into prison. And even though I did break the law and, you know, that I may have deserved a serious sentence, and I'm not trying to denote that. But I was, you know, through just, you know, like just remaining calm in the situation and realizing, you know, that
Yeah, you weren't trying to say that you didn't do it.
yeah, exactly.
You just I mean, you changed your life. Like
Yeah.
you did everything you needed to do to survive.
Yeah. And they were, you know, they knew what we had done, but they didn't have enough evidence, and they were willing to say that we were in court. The agents that were in charge of the investigation against us were willing to say to the judge that they're good people that made the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
And we think they suggested that I had 1 year probation and I got 2, but
Yeah.
that was it.
Oh man. I mean, I vividly remember that court hearing. Like I was just shaking the whole time.
Yeah. I also remember thinking that I was potentially going to be going to prison for 15 to 20 years.
Right.
I mean, with the,
That hung like over our heads for sure.
and I remember preparing myself for it. You know, if
Yeah.
I had to go to prison, I was going to do it and be a man about it and not try to, you know, say it wasn't my fault. I was going to go in there with a open heart and open mind and just realize that
Accept it.
I put myself in this position and I'm the one person that's responsible to deal with it. But I think in Ross's situation, to kind of bring it full circle, I just don't think that he can think that way sitting in prison. I don't see how he can. I'm sure he
for life.
does for life. I'm sure he does because
Yeah.
he's an intelligent person who seems like he's level-headed.
Right.
But to sit there,
he did accept it. Really
yeah, well, he
well.
did do an appeal, and that was last year, and unfortunately, he did not win his appeal. And now they're actually going after his co-partner, Variety Jones. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, I didn't really want to get too far into our whole story, but we did. And
We did.
yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, this podcast has definitely brought up a lot of like emotions from because it's so related to like what happened to us. I mean,
Right.
obviously not on that scale. However,
Yeah.
the feeling, hearing that audiobook about Ross, the feeling was there. Like I'm like, damn, I know exactly what that feels
Yeah.
like. Like
and exactly what it's like to
fight or
escalate.
flight. Yeah, absolutely.
And what it's like to not realize the seriousness of what you've done until they crash through the door. I mean, that
Yeah,
was
'cause
what it was like for us. It was like, I remember being the biggest, baddest, you know, with like my whole mentality of it. Like, you know, this is worth the risk, you know what I mean? Risk versus reward. Like, what are you going to do? Like, just, you know, make $10 an hour or whatever.
Right,
and that
you're
was
not
like,
playing into the system.
yeah, I wasn't
like-
going to pay into the system. I didn't want to pay federal taxes. A lot of his ideas were very similar to mine. And I was wrong and he was wrong. And, you know, when you're living in a certain country and you have these laws, it's like, look,
We're
you
still
can
living here.
right. And you can fight them, but they still have the military. They still have all these branches of government. And it's like when I was doing this, I remember my friend would always tell me like, man, you're so paranoid. Like, it's not like you need to stop thinking that everybody's out to get you. And I'm like, dude, everybody is out to get you. Like, they literally have divisions of enforcement officers that are searching for you.
Yeah, and life is the most precious thing.
Yeah.
Like, and you're gambling with that.
Right. And when you value, like, what you value in life, for me anyways, is time. And if you're willing to have
Family.
them take your time from you, because
Yeah.
that's what it is when you go to prison, they're taking your time from you. And if you're willing to give your time up for money, which when you're selling drugs or doing anything like that, which is similar to Ross, Ross never spent money.
Yeah.
He had millions of dollars, but he never spent money because he didn't want that attention.
Right.
So he lived minor. He always lived with other people, rented a room.
Roommate.
Yeah, lived with roommates, never really traveled, like wore the same clothes all the time. I mean, dude, what are you doing this for? You know what I mean? And that's the same with us when we were in that situation with the feds raiding our house. It was like we didn't spend money. Like we lived in this small house that was like right downtown, and it was like a 1-bedroom, 1-bath duplex. It was super small.
Yeah, and
we had a
we-
Geo Metro. Remember that? I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't wear flashy clothes. We didn't buy jewelry. We didn't spend any money on clothes. We didn't spend money on anything that could draw attention to us. We didn't ever have our friends come over. Never. Nobody knew where we lived. And it's like, what kind of life is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. It's like,
And we kept pushing. We had this plan to save up money to go to Costa Rica, and we kept pushing off that date. It's
yeah,
like,
it was like, okay,
oh, just
well,
one
we've got
more.
20,000. Let's wait till we have 30,000. Then we have
Yeah.
40,000. Let's wait till we have 50,000.
Yeah.
And it's like every
and
time
you get
that,
so wrapped up in the game and the feeling of it.
yeah.
That, I mean, that's all you're living for.
Yeah, and the feeling is great because it's
Yeah.
like this like false sense of power and freedom, and it's totally a false
Yeah.
sense. That's the key word there. It's a total false sense because you think, okay, I have the ability to go wherever I want, whenever I want. I can buy whatever I want, whenever I want. I can, travel. I'm not paying into the system. Nobody really knows what I'm doing. It's like this secret kind of like, it's like being a CIA agent or some shit. And so it's like, you know what I mean? I mean, it kind of is like that.
No,
it's like,
yeah.
So it's like, but none of that happens. You don't travel because you're so concerned with making money.
Yeah.
You don't buy anything because you're so concerned with having money.
Yeah, and you're not free because you're so paranoid all the time
Yeah.
of watching over your shoulder.
Yeah. And I didn't trust anybody.
No.
I mean, I would get mad at my really close friends regularly because I thought that they were putting me in danger over dumb shit, And it was like my family never knew what I was doing because every week I'd have a new cell phone,
Yeah.
And it
We
was
put our family through some shit.
so much shit. And it was like, I empathize with it. I understand it, but growing up and now I have a regular 9-to-5 job. I don't make $1 million. I'm, you know what I mean? I'm like, struggling sometimes, and it's like, but I feel free because I have the ability to, I have the ability to get pulled over and not have to worry about anything.
Yeah, and I mean,
Like-
spend time with your family and
Yeah,
your loved ones.
and not have my family disappointed, and not have to have them worry, am I dead? Remember, I mean, do you know how many times my parents thought that I was dead in that situation? It's crazy. So, but
Well, I'm glad we unveiled the story of Eric
yeah, well, yeah, it's
and me. Yeah.
yeah, it's been a crazy journey. We're lucky that we got through it the way we did,
Yeah, so
And-
dude, I think back to it all the time, and I'm just so grateful.
Yeah, me
To
too.
this day, I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, close call. Ooh,
Yeah, it's been what, 5 years?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, so it's been 5 years, and in the last 5 years, I've grown so much through that experience, and I feel like Ross would have grown so much in 5
Yeah.
years if he
Yeah,
was
he's
just
so
sitting behind
young.
bars for 5 years.
He's so young. I mean,
I know,
of course
dude.
he would have.
Fuck, it's like I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one
That's
of the guys.
how you learn. You fuck up.
Yeah, well, one of the guys was like, I think it was Jocko, but he was like, when I was 20, I thought I knew everything, and then I turned 30, and I realized when I was 20, I didn't know shit. And then when I was 30,
yeah.
or then when I was 30, I thought I knew so much, and I didn't know shit when I was 20. But then I turned 40, and I was like, holy fuck, I didn't know a goddamn thing when I was 30.
Yeah.
And like when you get to a point where you realize that tomorrow you're going to know more than you do today, and today you don't know shit, that's when you're really mature, is when you
Yeah.
recognize that you don't know shit.
You don't know shit.
And for Russ, he didn't know shit. He didn't
Yeah.
know the weight of the seriousness of the situation that he was in.
Yeah.
I mean, would he have done that knowing it? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it did spark a movement, and now he has books written about him. But
Yeah.
I don't think it was worth it. So
He's so interesting.
he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's great. And with that, I think that we've been working at this for about an hour and a half now, so we can wrap it up.
Cool.
Um,
We'll link that book, guys.
yeah, we'll link this book. It's called American Kingpin.
It's so
Extremely good book.
edge of your seat.
Yes, the entire time. It's the best book I've ever read, and it's
Listen.
all about Ross Ulbricht
Yeah.
and the start to finish Silk Road. And you know, if I missed anything, I apologize, but there's just so much in this case. It's just crazy, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you are interested in following us on Stitcher, iTunes, anything like that, you can keep up with future podcast episodes. If you email us at mindmeltpodcast@gmail.com with any questions, we'll answer them. And if you
Or
give us
topics.
yeah, if you give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher, we'll give you a shout out. So that's cool. But we appreciate everybody, and we appreciate the listeners, and stay tuned for next week. Or what are we going to talk about next week?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Well, I don't think we should just come up with
Okay.
one right now. Maybe
All
we
right.
should think about it.
Yeah, we'll post something tomorrow about a topic. We'll think
Well,
about it
guys,
tonight. So,
Enjoy your 4th.
Oh, it's not the 4th anymore. Enjoy your weekend after the 4th.
Yes. That too.
And
It's our 4th.
it's our
today.
4th because they're celebrating it in Bayview. And we
Be free.
appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a good rest of your weekend. Stay free, okay?
Bye.
Bye.